Hi everyone, Rukshan here, and thanks for joining me for this video. Today I'm going to be fact-checking our Premier Daniel Andrews, who I think is, a spreader of misinformation, possibly a super spreader of misinformation, especially when it comes to Israel. For some reason, he's always been downplaying any questions he gets about Israel. I'm not saying he gets questions all the time, but whenever he does, he tries to downplay what's happening in Israel. Now, as it's being reported around the world, Israel is actually one of the highest vaccinated countries in terms of the percentage of the population who's vaccinated. And when these questions are posed to Daniel Andrews, he kind of really makes an effort to misinform people. I don't know if he's doing it deliberately or he just doesn't know and he's not informed, but the answers he's giving don't actually reflect the reality on the ground. So I'm going to watch this video with you now with the question being asked. And just to note that today there was actually someone that kept asking him questions about Israel. But yeah, here is the video.
Premier, in Israel, Premier, they've just announced that they've hit the high mark in vaccinations, but Delta is still running through there. Their senior epidemiologist said yesterday that regardless of vaccinations, regardless of the new C24 drug, etc., that they have, that they will have to learn to live with it after the vaccination, and it will be like the flu. I mean, what do you say to that?
Hang on a second. The terms we use and the rules we live under and the freedoms we enjoy when we get to 80% are very, very different. But we're a long way from that. We're a long way from that right now. The last time I looked at Israel, they were not yet at 70%. They've done very well, but they're not yet at 70%.
All right, so there was a question, and the guy that asked the question framed it in such a way that the senior health people in Israel have saying they've reached their targets, but they're still having issues. But of course, Daniel Andrews knows more than the people in Israel who are saying these things. He's saying, "Oh no, I think they were still at 60%," and the last time he checked, they were at 60%. When was the last time that Daniel Andrews checked? Was it like a few months ago when they were at 60%? Because if you've even from a month ago, they were almost at 70%. And I think as of yesterday, they were at 78%. So to say that, they're still at 60%, like it's some sort of fact, and he's just because he, in the past he's seen it, I think is a attempt at misinformation and to downplay what's actually happening in Israel. And I'm going to demonstrate this by showing you guys an article from a news source that someone like Daniel Andrews would probably read, the New York Times. And this is an article from 2 days ago. So let's have a read of that. All right. So New York Times from the August 18th, 2021. The headline is Israel, once the model for beating COVID, faces new surge of infections. One of the most vaccinated societies, Israel, now has one of the highest infection rates in the world, raising questions about the vaccine's efficacy. Now, I'm going to link this article in this video, but I'm going to go down a page or so and read the important part to fact check Daniel Andrews' misinformation. The vast majority of Israel's older population had received 2 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine by the end of February. And by now, about 78% of the population, 12 and older, are fully vaccinated. So I'm just going to read that last line again. By now, about 78% of the population, 12 and older, are fully vaccinated. Let's have a listen to what Daniel Andrews, or how he characterized it.
They've done very well, but they're not yet at 70%. And they still have some rules on, and they've had to do all sorts of changes because they've seen it, tear through the unvaccinated community. But once
they've done very well, and he's got to admit they've done very well because Israel has been talked about as a model in terms of how a country can vaccinate its population very quickly. But yeah, as you can see from the article, at least 78% of the population is fully vaccinated with 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine, which is the vaccine that's available in Israel, and 12 and older, correct, right? So in Australia, as far as I know from the Doherty modeling, that's based on vaccination of people from 16 and older. So, in many ways, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, it would appear Israel is doing better if the population of 12 and older is 78% vaccinated with 2 jabs. Let's see what else Daniel Andrews goes on to say about this.
They still have some rules on, and they've had to do all sorts of changes because they've seen it, tear through the unvaccinated community. But once we get to 80%,
so he just throws that line in there, right? It's tearing through the unvaccinated community. They've had to put some rules back on because it's tearing through the unvaccinated community. And is that actually what's happening in Israel? So I did some more research and I found another article from a reputable science magazine, a science publication actually, not a magazine, a journal, who's discussing what's happening in Israel. Let's have a look at what that says. Israel has among the world's largest levels of vaccination for COVID-19, with 78% of those 12 and older fully vaccinated. So again, this is another source, not just the New York Times. This is a science journal that's got this. So they're also saying 78%. So I don't think Daniel's seen this either. The vast majority of the Pfizer vaccine. Yet the country is now logging one of the world's highest infection rates, with nearly 650 new cases daily per million people. More than half are in fully vaccinated people, underscoring the extraordinary transmissibility of the Delta variant and stoking concerns that the benefits of vaccination ebb over time. Israel was one of the first countries out of the gate last winter with its broad vaccination campaign. So, I mean, you can see that it's not how Daniel Andrews is portraying it as a pandemic or whatever of the unvaccinated, that, it's raging through the unvaccinated population. Yes, those in Israel who are unvaccinated are also, getting the virus, right? But according to this, scientific journal, the infections amongst the vaccinated are more than half of those who are ending up in these numbers. So for Daniel Andrews to just go out there and say these things like it's like fact, no, it's not. It's actual proper misinformation from one of our government officials. And he won't go out there and correct the record. I've seen Daniel Andrews multiple times use international data, particularly from America, from Texas and from Florida, to say that there's a pandemic of the unvaccinated. So he cherry picks data to suit his agenda, and things that don't suit, like what's happening in Israel, he will downplay those and, misdirect you with, information that could be true if it was a few months ago. So he's not technically lying, but the way he presents it is, I think, very devious in what he's attempting to do here. I'm going to play this video now from the CDC in America from yesterday, featuring, I think, their director. Fauci was there. There's a few people there. And in America, they're actually using this same data from Israel to say to the population in America that we should be considering a third booster shot, because the efficacy of the vaccines, even after 2 shots, are waning. And one of the examples they give is Israel, saying that there's a high infectious rate amongst the vaccinated. I'll play the comments now.
Another piece of data that we've been looking at is our international colleagues who are ahead of us, both in the Delta surge as well as have vaccinated a few weeks ahead of us in terms of large portions of their population that have been vaccinated. And data we're seeing from our international colleagues, specifically and especially Israel, have demonstrated a worsening of infections amongst vaccinated people over time. And so we remain concerned about that as we see in the context of Delta variant some breakthroughs that are occurring and decreased vaccine effectiveness that is occurring in the context of infection. We are watching other countries, the experience of other countries carefully, and concerned that we too will see what Israel is seeing, which is worsening infections over time.
So as you can see, different countries are using this data to present different scenarios to their population in terms of the reasons for taking certain actions, right? So you can see how all around the world, authorities are cherry picking data to mean different things for different scenarios they need, right? So Daniel Andrews is doing that currently in Victoria. Now, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a medical expert or a doctor. All I can do is assess and analyze the way in which these, press conferences and their language and, the representation of this in other media outlets is being portrayed. And you can make up your own minds. But yeah, I'm going to end it with Daniel Andrew finishing off this comment about Israel. Thanks for watching, guys, and let me know, do you think Daniel Andrews is spreading misinformation? And I'd love to see your comments. Thanks again.
The last time I looked at Israel, they were not yet at 70%. They've done very well, but they're not yet at 70%. And they still have some rules on, and they've had to do all sorts of changes because they've seen it, tear through the unvaccinated community. But once we get to 80%, then the rules do change, and there is a sense that everyone who can be offered a vaccine has been offered a vaccine. We can only do so much to implore people to come and be part of that program, and we don't lock down, the whole community to protect people who could have got a vaccine and chose not to. I've been very clear about that and been criticised for using that language, but that's the position. But we're a long way from that. So all of our language will change, the rules will change, the way we live our life will change when we get to 80 and hopefully higher than 80%.